Chapter 8. In Washington, the occupants of Mary Surratt's boarding house prepared for bed, too. That evening, the authorities paid another visit to put pressure on Mary and her daughter, Anna. The manhunters were desperate. 3 days after the assassination, John Wilkes Booth was still on the run. Seward's attacker was a mystery man. Stanton did not even know the assailant's name. John Surratt was suspected in the Seward attack, but there was no proof. Major W.H. Smith went to Surratt's boarding house to arrest the residents and search the house. Smith and his men questioned Mary, Anna, and other residents, then summoned a carriage to transport the women to headquarters. Just then, a man walking down H Street wandered up the front steps of the house, knocked on the front door, and rang the bell. It was soldiers and not Mrs. Surratt who opened the door to him. He stood before them, a large, powerful-looking man carrying a pickaxe. He was dressed in a gray coat, black pants, and a fine pair of boots. As soon as the man stepped inside and into the hall, a soldier shut the door behind him. The man immediately sensed that something was wrong. He said he was there to see Mrs. Surratt. The officer told him he was in the right place and began to question him. The officer wanted to know the man's occupation, why he was there so late at night, how old he was, and where he lived. The man claimed that he was there to find out what time he should start work digging a gutter for Mrs. Surratt in the morning. He said she had offered him the job when she had seen him working in the neighborhood. The soldier asked Mrs. Surratt to confirm the man's story. She stood 3 steps from Lewis Powell as the soldier asked, "Do you know this man, and did you hire him to come and dig a gutter for you?" Her eyes locked on the man's face in recognition. He was Lewis Powell, Seward's would-be assassin. Powell's remarkable face was unforgettable, and he had been to her home at least twice before. Mary raised her right hand as if swearing an oath. "Before God, sir, I do not know this man, and I have never seen him and did not hire him to dig a gutter for me." Powell looked at Mary in silence. Lewis Powell had been caught in a lie. Now he was trapped in this house full of soldiers. In moments, they would surely try to seize and arrest him. Powell was armed only with a pickaxe, but his incredible strength could turn that tool into a formidable weapon. If Powell chose to fight, he could certainly do great harm to a few of the soldiers before being captured or before being shot in the confusion. Powell glared at the soldiers. He could swing that axe quicker than they could draw their pistols. It was his move. Then, surprisingly, meekly, without protest, he surrendered without a fight. If Lewis Powell had not wandered into the government's hands this night, he might have escaped Washington and vanished from history. Instead, the government celebrated his capture as the first major break in the manhunt. Within hours, Seward's servant identified Powell as the knife-wielding maniac. The soldiers arrested Powell, Mary Surratt, her daughter Anna, Louis Weichman, and the rest of the boarders. They searched the house and found evidence: photographs of Confederate generals, one of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, some ammunition, and a photo of John Wilkes Booth hidden behind a picture frame. At headquarters, the interrogator, Colonel Wells, wanted to know what had brought Mary's son and John Wilkes Booth together, about her son's relationship with the other possible conspirators, and what her connection was to the newly arrested Lewis Powell. Mary Surratt proved to be cool and collected under questioning. She revealed nothing to help the authorities find Booth. She only admitted facts she was sure her questioners knew from other sources, especially her connection to Booth. She lied when she claimed she met Powell for the first time that evening as he arrived at her house while the soldiers were there. She admitted to knowing George Atzerodt, something the government already knew. Atzerodt was already connected to Booth from the evidence recovered in the search of German's room at the Kirkwood house. Mary Surratt did not tell Colonel Wells about Booth's April 14th visit to her, the binoculars, her carriage ride to Surrattsville, nor her instructions about the shooting irons. The questioning over for now, Wells refused to let Mary return home. He sent her to the old Capitol prison, where she would join the many other suspects and witnesses arrested after the president's murder. Though she did not suspect it that night, Mary Surratt would never see her boarding house again. With the arrests of Sam Arnold, Michael O'Laughlin, and Edmund Spangler, Monday, April 17th closed as the most successful day in the 3-day-old manhunt. Arnold, a 31-year-old Confederate Army veteran and former schoolmate of Booth's, was arrested based on a tip. He confessed that he participated in Booth's earlier scheme to kidnap the president, but he denied involvement in or knowledge of the assassination plot. Michael O'Laughlin, a 28-year-old childhood friend of Booth's, another former Confederate soldier and participant in the kidnapping plot, was also arrested on the 17th. Edmund Spangler, the 39-year-old stagehand from Ford's Theater, was also arrested. His crime was briefly holding the reins of Booth's horse in the alley behind Ford's Theater. Poor Spangler had nothing to do with the assassination or the earlier kidnapping plot. His long association with Booth, holding the mayor's reins, and the claim by another theater employee that Spangler did not tell pursuers which way Booth went down the alley earned Edmund a cell at the old Capitol Prison for the remainder of the manhunt. Many other people in the theater were rounded up, including the Fords. Stanton suspected the participation in the plot by other theater employees. How else could Booth have escaped so smoothly and easily? The theater itself was arrested, ordered closed, and was eventually confiscated from the Fords. The dragnet of the manhunters eventually rounded up more than 100 suspects. The arrests filled the headlines, but Booth, the most famous and recognizable man in America, remained free. Edwin Stanton needed help. He would be unable to continue to devote all of his time and brainpower to the manhunt. He had a war to finish. Just because Lee had surrendered his army did not mean the war was over for Stanton. Other Confederate armies remained in the field in some southern states. Some generals had not yet surrendered. Confederate President Jefferson Davis was on the run, the subject of his own massive manhunt. Stanton had the War Department and Union Army to run and the Reconstruction of the South to plan. He had to investigate the assassination, capture the conspirators, and organize a military tribunal to try them. It was more than one mind, even Stanton's, could manage. He had to delegate authority to a small circle of trusted manhunters, including Lieutenant Lafayette Baker, newly arrived from New York.